What if everything you believed was a lie? One man's brush with death reveals shocking truths and leads him to embrace a new faith. This gripping tale of spiritual awakening will challenge everything you thought you knew about belief. My name is Daniel Anderson, and I'm 35 years old. I live in a small town called Willow Creek, nestled in the mountains of Montana. For most of my life, I was a devoted Muslim. I prayed 5 times a day, fasted during Ramadan, and tried my best to follow the teachings of Islam. But one day, everything I thought I knew was turned upside down. I grew up in a strict Muslim family in Illinois. My parents moved to the United States from Pakistan before I was born. They wanted a better life for their children, but also wanted us to keep our faith and culture. From the time I was little, I was taught that Islam was the only true religion and that questioning it was wrong. Every weekend, I went to Islamic school. I learned to recite the Quran in Arabic, even though I didn't understand most of what I was saying. The teachers told us that Allah would reward us for reciting, even if we didn't know the meaning. It seemed odd to me, but I was too scared to ask questions. At home, my parents were very strict about following Islamic rules. We didn't celebrate birthdays or holidays like Christmas. My mother always wore a hijab, and when my sister turned 12, she had to start wearing one too. I remember how sad she looked when she first put it on. As I got older, I started to have doubts. I saw my non-Muslim friends living happy lives without all the rules we had to follow. They could eat whatever they wanted, wear whatever clothes they liked, and date whoever they chose. But I pushed these thoughts away. I was afraid of disappointing my family, and even worse, of making Allah angry. After high school, I went to college to study engineering. It was there that I met Emily, a Christian girl who became my best friend. She was kind and smart, and she never tried to convert me. But she did ask me questions about my faith that made me think. One day, Emily asked me why Allah would send people to hell just for not believing in Him, even if they were good people. I didn't have a good answer. I started to wonder about all the non-Muslims I knew. Were they really all going to hell? It didn't seem fair, but I was too scared to really question my faith. Instead, I became even more religious. I grew a beard, started wearing traditional clothes, and spent more time at the mosque. I thought if I tried harder to be a good Muslim, my doubts would go away. After college, I got a job at an engineering firm in Willow Creek. I liked the quiet town, and it had a small but active Muslim community. I married a Muslim woman named Layla, and we had 2 children, a boy and a girl. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, but inside, I was struggling. The more I learned about the world, the harder it was to accept some of the things I had been taught. I read about scientific discoveries that didn't match what the Quran said about creation. I learned about historical events that didn't fit with the peaceful religion I thought I knew. I started to have bad dreams about hell. In my dreams, I saw good people I knew burning in fire just because they weren't Muslim. I would wake up feeling very scared and guilty for even having these thoughts. One day, I found a website that discussed different perspectives on Islam. At first, I was angry and wanted to defend my faith. But as I read more, I couldn't ignore the questions they raised. They talked about contradictions in the Quran, challenging aspects of Islamic teachings, and how some interpretations didn't make sense in the modern world. I felt like my whole world was falling apart. Everything I had believed in my whole life seemed to be built on shaky ground, but I was too afraid to talk to anyone about my doubts. I was scared of being called a traitor, of losing my family and friends. So I lived a double life. On the outside, I was still the good Muslim man everyone expected me to be. I went to the mosque, fasted during Ramadan, and taught my kids about Islam. But inside, I was filled with questions and doubts. This went on for months. I couldn't sleep well. I lost weight. And I was always worried. My wife noticed something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her what I was going through. How could I explain that I was starting to think our whole life was based on a lie? Then came the day that changed everything. It was a normal Thursday morning. I got up, had breakfast with my family, and drove to work. I was on a construction site checking a new building. I climbed up to the 4th floor to look at some wiring. I was so lost in my thoughts, worrying about my faith and what it all meant, that I wasn't paying attention to where I was stepping. Suddenly, my foot slipped on a loose board. I felt a moment of panic as I lost my balance. I tried to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing there. The last thing I remember is falling through the air, seeing the ground coming closer and closer. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't on the construction site anymore. I wasn't anywhere I recognized. I was floating in a vast, dark space. It wasn't scary, though. It felt peaceful, like being wrapped in a warm blanket. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but this felt different from any dream I'd ever had. Everything was sharp and clear, more real than reality itself. I looked down at my hands, but they weren't there. I didn't have a body at all. I was just consciousness. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the distance. It started small, like a star, but quickly grew bigger and brighter. I felt drawn to it, like a magnet pulling me in. As I moved towards the light, I started to hear voices. They were soft at first, just whispers, but they got louder as I got closer to the light. The voices were speaking in all different languages, but somehow I could understand them all. They were telling stories, their life stories. I heard tales of joy and sorrow, of love and loss from people of all different backgrounds and beliefs. As I got closer to the light, I started to see shapes and colors. They swirled and danced, forming beautiful patterns. Then the shapes started to take form. I saw people, or rather, the spirits of people. They were glowing with a soft light, and their faces were filled with peace and joy. Among the spirits, I saw a figure that stood out from the rest. He was shining brighter than all the others, and I felt an overwhelming sense of love and warmth coming from him. Somehow, I knew who he was without being told. It was Jesus. This confused me even more. Why was I seeing Jesus? As a Muslim, I had been taught that Jesus was just a prophet, not the Son of God. But the being I saw now was clearly much more than a prophet. The love and power radiating from him were beyond anything I could have imagined. Jesus smiled at me, and in that moment, I felt all my doubts and fears melt away. He didn't speak with words, but I could hear his voice in my mind. "Welcome, my child," he said. "You have many questions. Come, let me show you the truth." With that, I felt myself being lifted up higher and higher. The spirits around me faded away, and I found myself in a new place. It looked like a giant library, with books stretching as far as I could see in every direction. But these weren't ordinary books. When I looked at them, I could see the stories they contained playing out like movies in my mind. Jesus gestured to the books. "These are the true stories of all paths," he said. "See for yourself what is true and what is not." I focused on a book that I somehow knew was about my own faith. As I did, scenes started to play in my mind. I saw the history, the teachings, and the actions of its followers throughout history. I saw both the good and the bad, the moments of peace and the times of conflict. I realized that, like all human endeavors, it was a mix of light and shadow. Then Jesus showed me another book, this one about his own life and teachings. I saw his message of love, compassion, and forgiveness. I saw his sacrifice and his resurrection. I saw his followers spreading his message, often at great personal cost. As I watched these scenes, I felt a change happening inside me. The fear and doubt that had plagued me for so long were replaced by a sense of peace and joy. For the first time in my life, I felt truly loved and accepted by God. Jesus then took me to another part of this heavenly realm. We were in a beautiful garden, more lovely than anything I had ever seen on earth. The colors were brighter, the air was fresher, and everything seemed to be alive with a soft, glowing light. In this garden, I saw people from all times and places. They were all different, but they all had one thing in common, a look of pure joy and peace on their faces. As we walked through the garden, Jesus explained more to me about the truth of God and salvation. "Many paths may lead people to seek God," he said, "but I am the way, the truth, and the life." It's not about following rules or saying the right words. It's about having faith in me and allowing my love to transform you. He showed me scenes from my own life, times when I had felt God's presence without realizing it, the kindness of a stranger, the beauty of nature, the love of my family. All of these were ways that God had been reaching out to me. Then Jesus showed me something that broke my heart. I saw my family, my wife and children, crying at my hospital bed. I realized that in the physical world, I was lying unconscious, hovering between life and death. "Your time has not yet come," Jesus said. "You have a choice. You can stay here with me now, or you can go back and share what you have learned." I thought about my family, about all the others who might be struggling like I had been. I knew what I had to do. "I want to go back," I said. "I want to tell everyone about your love." Jesus smiled. "Remember," he said, "I am always with you. Even when you can't see me, I am there. Trust in me, and I will guide you." With that, I felt myself being pulled back. The beautiful garden faded away, and I was once again in the darkness. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I knew that I was loved, and that gave me courage for what was to come. As I journeyed back, I saw flashes of the life I had lived. I saw the times I had helped others, and I felt joy. I saw the times I had hurt people, and I felt regret. But overarching all of this was a sense of God's love and forgiveness. I also saw glimpses of the future. I saw myself sharing my story, facing rejection from some, but also seeing others find hope and peace. I saw my family struggling to understand, but ultimately supporting me. I saw a new life full of challenges, but also full of joy and purpose. As I got closer to my body, I started to feel pain. My whole body ached, and I could hear the beeping of hospital machines. Part of me wanted to turn back, to return to the peace and joy I had experienced. But I knew I had a mission now. I had to tell others what I had seen and learned. With one final push, I felt myself re-enter my body. The pain became more intense, and I could hear voices around me. Slowly, I opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was the worried face of my wife, Sarah. She was holding my hand, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me awake, her face lit up with relief and joy. "Daniel, you're awake," she cried, squeezing my hand. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and sore. A nurse quickly came over and gave me some water. After taking a sip, I managed to whisper, "How long was I out?" "5 days," Sarah said. "The doctors, they weren't sure if you would wake up. You fell from so high." I nodded, remembering the accident. But it felt like a lifetime ago. So much had happened since then. Or had it? Was it all just a dream? But no, it had felt too real, too vivid to be just a dream. Over the next few days, as I recovered in the hospital, I thought about everything I had experienced. I knew I had to tell Sarah and my family, but I was scared. How would they react? Would they think I was crazy? Would they reject me? Finally, when I was stronger, I decided it was time. Sarah was sitting by my bed, and our children had just left after a visit. I took a deep breath and said, "Sarah, I need to tell you something important." She looked at me with concern. "What is it?" Slowly, hesitantly at first, but then with growing confidence, I told her everything. I told her about the light, about meeting Jesus, about learning the truth about my faith and his teachings. As I spoke, I could see the shock and disbelief on her face. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Sarah said, "Daniel, you've been through a traumatic experience. Maybe your mind is just confused." "No, Sarah," I said firmly. "I know what I experienced. It was real, more real than anything I've ever known. I can't go back to living a lie. I'm a Christian now." Sarah gasped. "Do you know what you're saying? You can't be serious." "I am serious," I said. "I know this is hard to understand, but please give me a chance to explain more. Read the Bible with me. Let's explore this together." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I don't understand this, Daniel, but I love you. I'll listen. I can't promise more than that." It was a start. Over the next few weeks, as I recovered at home, Sarah and I had many long talks. I shared more about what I had learned, and we read parts of the Bible together. She had a lot of questions and doubts, just as I once had, but she was willing to listen, and that was all I could ask for. Telling my parents and the rest of my family was harder. My father was furious. He called me a traitor to my faith and my family. My mother cried and begged me to come back. It broke my heart to see them so upset, but I knew I couldn't deny the truth I had experienced. Word spread quickly in our community. People I had known for years now looked at me with suspicion or pity. Some tried to convince me I was mistaken, while others avoided me entirely. It was a lonely and difficult time. But I also found unexpected support. My old college friend Michael, a devout Christian, was overjoyed when I told him about my experience. He introduced me to his church, where I found a new community that welcomed me with open arms. Learning about Christianity was like discovering a whole new world. The depth of its history and teachings amazed me. I spent hours talking with the pastor, asking questions, and studying the Bible. Sarah's journey was slower than mine, but she was open to learning. She started attending church with me and reading the Bible on her own. Slowly, I saw changes in her, too. One day, with tears in her eyes, she told me she finally understood what I had been trying to tell her. She wanted to become a Christian, too. Our children were young enough to adapt more easily. We started teaching them about Jesus and his love, and they embraced it wholeheartedly. Seeing their pure, simple faith was a beautiful thing. Not everything was easy, of course. We faced rejection from much of our old community. My parents still struggled to accept my choice, but we also found a new family in the church, people who supported us and loved us unconditionally. As time went on, I felt called to share my story more widely. I started a blog, then a YouTube channel, talking about my near-death experience and what I had learned about faith. It wasn't always easy. I received angry messages and even threats from some people, but I also heard from others whose lives were changed by hearing my story, and that made it all worthwhile. Looking back now, years later, I'm amazed at the journey God has taken me on, from a confused and doubting believer to a committed Christian, from fear and uncertainty to peace and purpose. I know now that the truth really does set you free. My experience showed me that there's more to life than what we can see and touch. There's a spiritual reality that's just as real, maybe even more real than our physical world. And at the center of that reality is Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. If this story has touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others who might be searching for the truth. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell to stay updated on more life-changing testimonies. Your support helps us reach more people with the message of love and truth. Remember, in a world full of darkness, you can be the light that leads others to hope. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you on your own spiritual journey.